would like to show you some of the projects I'm working at the moment, because I just 1st of January started doing my stuff. So it's all in the development phase. But I think to reach a sustainable development, might it be the UN goals or whatever, you need education, for sure. Whatever education means, I don't think it's formal education only, it's informal, non-formal education as well. That's very valid, very important, especially if we talk about the African continent. And I think skills for the 21st century are needed, because the skills of the 20th century are in some aspects and respects no longer valid. And we need to look at different skills maybe, taking into account that with digitalization, a lot of knowledge and information is around that needs to be taught differently or accessed differently. And the creative economy, I think, is something I just like, and that's where I work, being or having been an artist as well. So at SABAA.education, I think with all projects and all organizations and everything, you need to know who's behind it. So you heard already from the introduction who's behind it. It's me. And my general field of action is the creative economy, it's idea generation, project organization, and arts and culture. And I see myself as a catalyst, in a way, bring people together, bring ideas together, bringing money and people and ideas together, because money as a form of energy seems to be rather important. Well, that was me with 3 years of age, I think. I was interested in sounds and was curious, so my career as a researcher seems to be having developed from that bucket somehow, and just put it in. I'm a professor of communication still, media and aesthetics, former university president, theater dramaturg, director, that's the artistic field, writer as well. As a journalist, event creative, I have been doing lots of big events or conceiving, creating events for the German car industry and companies like that. But I consider myself being a networker in all streets of life and an artist as well. Why SABAA? I think everybody should answer to the question, why do you do what you do in a way? And the question I put to myself when I was coming to the end of my terms as a university president, do I still want to work in the academic field? And I thought, nah, but what can I do? What can I do being 61? What can I do? Maybe it's a question a 61-year-old poses to himself as well. And I had a personal attachment to Africa when I was in the States. I was an exchange student. I lived together with 2 African students, one from Ghana, one from Nigeria, in the same room for 1 year, and that was an intense experience. And I always liked the music and things we talked about, and then the introduction to that. And I thought, what's important these days? And there's lots of things important these days, but Africa is something of my interest, and well, thinking about issues there in connection with creative industries and education is something I would like to do. And that's where my creativity, my experience, my skills could be put to use. And the general idea is really providing local solutions for local problems, because even if the problems are global, they are always local, because they affect single individuals in single situations, and that's local, even though it's a global. And you have to have a local solution. We need to work on global solution with the UN for sure, but we need to work on how to adapt that to the local terrain. And it could be different in every different terrain. And resilience is something I think it's very important. If we talk about resilience and sustainability, how all these projects can endure, can even endure after funding maybe is gone, so that they're self-sustainable then. You were talking about as well, what when funding dries out. And I had a workshop with the Bosch Foundation, some of you might know, one of the bigger German foundations, and they said, well, we think we should do everything different now after 40 years or so. And they quit all their projects with a 2 years time for them to run and to secure funding or to change. And I said, we made people dependent, and we think about how can we do things differently in the philanthropy funding community and things like that. So I think that's very important what's going on there, and that's going on with a lot of these organizations worldwide, that funding is set up in a different way, and how can we make things sustainable and resilient. Once again, transparency, like you said, education, and lots of other things pay into that. Co-create, do it participatory, creates resilience as well. Only if people are involved, make it their own, it makes sense in a way. Reciprocity, the balance of give and take is very important. I mean, I worked with Mohammed Yunus as well. You mentioned him, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate on inventing microfinance in a way. And he always advocates saying, if you give only, it makes people shallow, dependent, you break their pride. So how can we make it a give and take? That's the situation. That's why you put a micro loan there with a micro gain you have there and a micro fee you have to pay, because then you are an individual. You are taken into account. I act as a think tank, I could say. I'm in various networks and things like that. And I like to nurture art and creativity. And the economy, I mean, you've been talking in the beginning of how we should do things together. And I think we need to evolve in a way if we want to, well, get along with all the problems we're having. We need to evolve from the economy, which is an I-economy, to a we-economy. How can we create a sustainable economy, a circular economy, making money? Wonderful, great. I like the idea of social business of Professor Yunus, making money. Everybody involved should really make money, should make good money. But there's a surplus, and this surplus can be used to give back. That's the basic idea, and I think it's an idea we can really work with and rely on. Education is one key. There's some people I support in Uganda. I will talk about them a little while later. And the skills for the 21st century seem to be different competencies now. It means reflection, communication, co-creation, creativity. Because how to solve an equation, that's something you do with Excel maybe. And you need to know how to run Excel, but there's a YouTube video how to do that and stuff like that. But how to work in groups, how to be human, how to perceive and how to communicate, that's something you need to train all the time in a face-to-face situation. You need to be really able to relate to these people around them. To be empathetic means to be human, not to know means to be human. And this, I think, in our VUCA, no, it's a VUCA world, it's volatile, it's unknown, it's flexible, this world we're in, it's liquid, it's changing all the time, and with these skills we can approach this flexible situation, because knowledge will age quite fast, and we need to be able to step beyond that, to assess knowledge, to reflect knowledge. So these, I think, are the challenges education has to work with these days, how to represent knowledge, make knowledge accessible, and to put it into a human communicative frame. Every organization needs a mission statement, great, all the time. So I have a mission statement too, which I don't read to you. You can read it yourselves and don't have to listen to me, but it involves the keywords that I was talking about. And I think if we talk about the great transformation of the 21st century, digital globalization, climate change, this is the great transformation, we are all prone to. We can't escape from that. We are all prone to this great transformation, and we have to design it together. There's no way out of that, just as simple, and we can only, I think, do it by sharing, caring, understanding, and acting. And not just talking about it, but acting as well. So some of the projects I'm involved with, one is in Uganda. I support Startup Africa there. 3 young guys actually from Germany, and I went down, and it's a social entrepreneurship initiative. They have a program that involves design thinking as a method, and they cooperate with 9 Ugandan universities, where this program is an add-on, and within 3 months, they create, well, about 10 startups with Ugandan people, going to business plans, going to itineration of ideas, and so on and so on. And so far, within a year, they have created 40 startups, Ugandan startups, of which 25 are still operating, continuing to grow, making money maybe, and things like that. So this, the universities actually buy into, meaning they support it in giving them a room, and they're going to Rwanda now as well. And I supported them, for example, by a company I know here in Berlin. It's an IT company. They have a big educational platform where they can host material, online material, and stuff like that. So they created an app for them for free, where you have the whole, let's say, entrepreneurship education in an app, which you can access outside of your classroom and things like that. So that's I did there, and I sent friends of mine down there. You can see some of them, and they're social media activists. So they talked about how to be represented in social media and things like that. So it's very hands-on, and on the other hand, providing IT support. Another project, I work with the University of Dar Es Salaam in Tanzania, and this is a DAD, German Academic Exchange Service project, for 4 years, and it looks about how can we integrate employability into our study programs. So far we have neglected that. German and Tanzanian government looks at that now as well. And in the area of humanities, what do we need to change in our study programs to focus on employability and aspects of that? So they cooperate with my former university. One focus point is the music program. They have a music program, we have a music program, and it will be about how can I find work, how can I manage myself and stuff like that, plus, naturally, how to adapt to a changing sound and economic system worldwide. Another one is Kreativpiloten. This is actually a photo taken at the Republika Accra. I don't know if you know Republika. Republika is a German Berlin thing that originated 10 years ago. And first of all, it was a small gathering of people that were bothered by how the net economy and the net society is going to look. Sometimes hackers, sometimes activists, sometimes politicians. And it grew from 250 people attending to 10,000 people attending, with Mercedes-Benz sponsoring, because it really became an issue. And it's always kind of a festival. It's speakers plus party plus art. So it's a very interesting format. And they build a community, meaning the programming of this event has been done by the community. It's nobody saying, oh, we want this keynote, this keynote, this keynote. No, it's a community that votes, that looks at it, and stuff like that. So you have lots of tracks and a community-built festival. And this has been brought to Accra, Ghana, with GIZ money has been brought to Accra, Ghana. And I'm thinking about Kreativpiloten. Kreativpiloten, creative pilots or pilots or pioneers in the creative industries, is another German state-funded program as well by Ministry of Economics. And for 10 years it has been looking for the creative industries. They're creative industries hubs. And I think creative industries have something to give to Africa or provide something in Africa. Whereas when I say Africa, I mean, I always feel a bit strange, but I don't want to say global south, or actually it should say in various African countries or African continent, to be really precise, because Africa is just a story, but there are African countries, different African individuals. But anyways, these creative pilots with the creative industry, talking about economics in Germany is really important. If you look at the gross economic product of Germany, it's contributing more than the finance industry or the chemical industry. It's below the car industry, but it's really important, worldwide as well, recognized, and recognized by various African countries such as Rwanda, Uganda, who now have their own programs for creative industries, and look at that, because A, it's small scale, it caters to the individual, it's very digital, and it's very resilient because it's a network economy. It's not the old-fashioned, let's say, like you have in Germany, a lot of that very hierarchical industry. It's a network industry and economy. And these creative pilots is a program that you can apply. There's usually applying 300 individual startups, people that create something in the creative industries, a product. So it's all entrepreneurs, people want to produce, change something. And then through a process, 30 are elected every year and are then presented to the public. Usually the Minister of Economics, Peter Altmaier, was 2 weeks ago. He was there, holds a speech, so it's a very high-level program. And what they get is not money, but they get 1 year of mentoring, networking, being taken care of, looked after, challenged, and really pushed to develop. And it produced some wonderful results, and we're looking into maybe we can offer that with help of the German government to, let's say, Rwanda or Ethiopia or whatever countries would be interested. So that's another project I'm working on. Music production taps into the DJ interest we had before. Electronic, lots of young people now produce music with their computer. Instrument is one thing, computer is the other thing. Berlin electronic dance music, lots of discos and DJs around everything. In Berlin, you do have the two world market leaders in software and hardware for electronic music production, Ableton and Native Instruments. And they bought into that. They provide codes, they provide software and things like that. And working together with Goethe Institute, who went to the African Bass Festival in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, and people performed there. And it arose, yes, there is a need to establish a training program, which would be half online, because online needs to be there, and half with work camps, workshops, and so on site. And we have to look at that, how we can invite people to Berlin, but do it in Ouagadougou or at other festivals actually around. And there's like Music in Africa, that's a sustainable organization, African website and production site, which can host the songs as well. So it taps into the world market that can be offered, that can be played, can be promoted, and things like that. It's an ecosystem that should develop, actually. So that's another thing I'm working on, hopefully launch it soon. Another idea is, I think you all, I guess, know Tinder or any other matching platform. I mean, most know, nobody uses it, but anyways, CSR, corporate social responsibility. In Europe, the big companies now have to produce a corporate social responsibility report every year, show what they do in, well, social responsibility, how they interact with society, what do they do, and so on. Companies that are not listed in the stock market, it's different, but everybody looks at social responsibility. Sustainability for sure, ecological, but social responsibility as well. So there's an urge, a need to look into that, and I think if you create a platform that helps matching German companies, small, medium enterprises with small, medium enterprises, entrepreneurs in African countries. You go through a self-assessment process, and you get consulting, but you need matching. Two will profit from that because the German companies have something they can tell. They might even have workforce coming over. They have innovation. African individuals, companies have access to a larger market and things like that. So something like that is being, at the moment, talked about with the Mittelstandsvereinigung, which is the representation of the small and medium enterprises here in Germany. Another thing is more in the art field, the African Gallery. This is an NGO hosted in Ghana, and they are collecting street photography, but not collecting in that sense that they go around and look at photographers, but it's African photographers from various countries that offer their work there, and it's curated. So sexist images are out, marketing are out, selfies are out and stuff like that. So you have kind of a quality control. Not everybody can put stuff up there. But you have 2,000 images that really show, let's call it African life, reality, which is differently represented than by white male press photographers or documentaries and stuff like that. And it's women photographers, you have female women's stories and things like that. And with this, I really would like to produce an exhibition here in Germany that could maybe try to tell a different narrative on Africa, on life, on what's it all about, because the usual image is still catastrophes, hunger, war, or the touristic image is natives, sand, animals, or whatsoever, and both are rather inadequate in a way, because they don't represent the whole, and there are different aspects and positive aspects that could then eventually even lure people to get a more realistic view for tourism offers and different tourism offers maybe. So presenting that maybe with Brot für die Welt, and as the Protestant church, big charity and so on, so they're well connected, and with them you can do something like that. And on the other hand, through that, the photographers get exposure, and if their photo is being used or cited or printed or whatever, they get royalties. So it's a source of income. It's a social business as well, creating exposure for them, creating income for them. And I'm talking to a company like Lumas. Lumas is in the big cities, and they have high quality prints for bourgeois living rooms or dentist practices or something like that. And it's kind of an artwork or art design. And why not have a 20 images African story in there that you can then create income as well. Another thing, I've been always interested, I don't know why, interested in beads. I like the African beads and the beadwork. I think it's a genuine expression, and these beads, I mean, they're very historic, very old as well, because, I mean, lots of them come from the slave trade in that time. They were produced in Venice in 1600 or so. For a handful of beads, you might have been able to buy 100 human beings or whatsoever. So they're still around in a way that tell a story. Beads are being produced by recycled glass now. You break down bottles and stuff, and you produce beads, so there's a sustainable effect. And the art is being lost in a way. It's very traditional, different patterns have different meanings, and I'm looking for people that want to take that into the modern age, let's put it that way, in our today's time, working with the patterns, producing them differently, design new designs and things like that, and combine that with a German fashion brand so that they can be sold at high level here. Again, creating social impact, as then money goes back, and the women that usually do that in the villages put these things together, limited edition, get money for projects, stuff like that. So the beads are something I think are on their way as well. And that's it so far. Just some of my ideas and some of my content, and thank you. Questions? So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer some. I didn't go in depth into everything. Yes, please.
Is the music production program an idea, or is it something that you guys have done already?
It's more than an idea, because the players are there, like Ableton, and I would say until the end of this year, it will be online, it will be funded, and then it will be accessible. So all the things I was showing are beyond the stage of mere ideas. I mean, there are more ideas, but these are all projects that are running and are, well, on their way, let's put it that way. Yeah. Please, excuse me.
Do you think that the dual German system that we have of vocational schools, professional schools, trade schools, that could be an export model for Africa?
No. And yes. Because the thing is, I know GIZ, the German agency, they're promoting that all the time. The German approach doesn't work. The idea is great. The German approach is you need a lot of companies that are willing to then employ or actually take these apprentices, because it's half vocational training and half training on the job. But you don't have that many companies and stuff like that. But the idea of you have a training on a job, plus you have, let's call it a theoretical or different skills training, is wonderful. That's the dual system. That should be, and it needs to be adapted to every country and every country's situation. So that's why I say yes and no. If you do the German system, it evolved because of the circumstances you have here. And the German idea that you need to be a master electrician and you have to have that qualified and you have to have 3 years of training and it needs to be real quality and everything, as opposed to, let's say, England. There, you're an electrician, you have some training. If the house doesn't burn down, that's fine. Then you have clients. Yep, but it's just a different system, different approach. So, yes, please.
Yes. Through your networking together with the African countries, what were the criteria of the choices you make? Why Tanzania? Why Ghana? Why Burkina Faso? Why not Benin? Why not Togo?
Yeah, it's a mixture of chance, where I had contacts before, and that just happened by chance. It's not a conscious choice. My limitation is, sorry to say, my French is really bad. So the Francophone African countries, I'm going to Senegal because a friend of mine, a professor of mine, is doing a big project there, and I will see. But this is a limitation for me. I mean, German doesn't play a role anyways, but English is okay. So that's one of the choices. And then in the end, for me, it comes down, do I like to work with the people? How is the feel of the place? Do I like it there? In the end, it's about meeting, being there, and relating. Any other? Well, thank you. So thank you very much.
Before I let you leave the stage, may I ask a question as well?
Yes, please do.
All right. Actually, we do have time for a few more questions. The ambassador should be here in a few minutes. So
Okay. We can. Well, I can extemporate and tell lots of stories, but just as let's exchange some. Yeah.
I had a question for you as someone who's worked, both in Africa and also in Europe, going back and forth. Do you see also opportunities for the African diaspora to engage more with Africa? Because one of the opportunities I've discussed with the students, the African diaspora is actually bigger than the African population, socioeconomically usually in a better situation, which explains why Western Union transfers usually go in one direction, not the other direction, but it's very fragmented. Ghanaian diaspora works with Ghana, Nigerian diaspora works with Nigeria, and it doesn't seem as if there's really the sense of a whole. They go together hand in hand. When we look at Barack Obama, this and that, there's some powerful people in the African diaspora. So first question, why is it? Is this just due to the colonial history of divisions and this and that? Why doesn't the diaspora work more together? And do you see examples of maybe initiatives that are already there where the diaspora is working together to try to strengthen and empower, whether it's economic bridges, cultural bridges, or beyond?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I mean, talking about the diaspora, when you were talking, I thought about, what about, like, let's call it black tourism, diaspora tourism, which is something that's a chance that's there for sure, an idea. But I mean, would we speak, and that's the issue of Africa. I mean, it's a continent with 55 countries. And even though the borders have been drawn in a very crazy manner and whatsoever, they consider themselves to be countries at the moment, or most of them at least, and the borders are there. And would you talk about how the European diaspora is sending, it's not unified, it's not sending money back to Europe? There is the European diaspora, but it was Germans immigrating, it was Dutch immigrating, it's now Polish immigrating to UK, being kicked out now. And where did they send money? Back to Poland, not to Europe. So the connection is between the place where you're born in a way, and that is, if you look at it, I mean, people usually tend to stay, even in a very mobile society, around 100 miles in a circle around where they were born, and it's only 10 or 20% of the worldwide population that's on the move because they can economically do it. So people send money back home, and home is not Africa, home is not Europe, home is Poland, home is Algeria, home is Ghana, I would say. And there's this Pan-African movement that, from my knowledge, I don't know, but that was in the 60s or so, and 70s, was an intellectual idea, but it never really took place in Africa, as well as Europe. Europe is an idea, and something works and something doesn't work. And for a lot of people, we see it falling apart. It's an idea, but that's it. I mean, there were things Pan-African for sure, and others work and don't work. But that's my impression.
Okay, because I'd love to get maybe your feedback, also others, especially Africans in the room, whether North Africans or also others. Obviously, I wasn't referring specifically to Western Union. There, of course, to my family, this and that, etc.
Yeah.
But the broader issue, I mean, there I would disagree your comparison about sort of Europe and Africa. I think Europe has succeeded in so many ways multilaterally. Okay, Brexit is there, yes, but look at what's been accomplished in terms of European Union, trade, exchange, Erasmus Mundus, etc. European houses, European Commission offices all over the world. I mean, there are many examples. Also now with France and Germany, the new initiatives that have just been signed in terms of also the collaborations. Alliance Française Goethe Institute. Look at UNIque, this network of all the European national cultural institutes. So I think there are many examples. And I always look at Europe as the great success story of really multilateralism that's come so far.
Sure
so my
is.
question to you and also to the Africans here, where do we see the future of the African Union? Is there really a roadblock that's sort of blocking it from moving ahead? Could we see the African Union in such a form like
Just
the European Union?
maybe a tiny funny story adding on to that. I was at just 1 minute. I was at the e-learning Africa in Kigali, Rwanda. At the end, you had a funny discussion, and the discussion like you had in English universities, you have to be pro and you have to be con. And the question was, should Africa adopt the fourth Industry 4.0, the digital revolution? And the guys against were saying, A, it comes from Europe. It's not good anyways. Everything that came from Europe is not good. So far it brought only problems with them. And look at the African Union. It's in their plan. But what is their plan, it's called? It's Africa 2063. And how can you trust leaders that will be dead when the plan has been achieved? So that's one of the issues. And the new and the old Africa I found very interesting, because the lady, there was a young Rwandan woman that was pro, saying, yeah, we need to adapt to that. She stood up and said, an older guy, 55, university lecturer like I am, and so he said, no, I'm against it. And she said, well, I'm 27, I'm so-and-so, I'm married, I have 2 kids, and I just sold my company for $10 million. And you, Papa, pointing to the older guy, you are the old Africa. I am the new Africa. This is where I see changes. The young generation really changing, waking up, doing things. Sorry, that was just...
Just observation about the subject. You evoked the Pan-Africanism. The Pan-Africanism under the leadership of John Patmo and Kwame Nkrumah and Steve Banda. They after the Manchester conference in 1945, it was a very good idea. But the problems faced by Nkrumah, even in '63 when he created the African organization, I mean, there was, let's say, 2 tendencies: the Anglophones from one way, and the Francophones from the others. And there were clashes about how to create the United States of Africa. Even Gaddafi failed as well. And I think that Western Africa is linked to France, even their currency.
Yeah, and dominated sometimes. Yeah.
And even the president or the rulers of the West African countries, they are linked to France as well, such as Dema or Paul Biya. I mean, from my point of view, they should leave.
Yeah.
They should leave. I mean, the people to express themselves.
Yeah.
This is why I said in my communications that Ghana is doing work.
No.
Senegal is trying to do well.
Yeah.
But the others no.
Yeah. There's an interesting book, I think, Afrofuturism. It's just being discussed. It's about this, how is a new Pan-African approach going to be? And it's written by a Senegalese professor of economics, and it was part of the group that presented the ideas on restitution of artwork to Macron. And he wrote this book, Afrofuturism, which is an interesting proposal, a new Pan-Africanism.
From the other hand, when we talk about the diaspora, Africa has a diaspora, especially in the United
United States, in Europe,
Yeah.
but they are not organized. There is not a framework, and cadre ils peuvent travailler. And due to the spread of corruption, the dictatorship in many countries in Africa, they don't want to be involved in, let's say, the development of the African continent.
Yes, addressing the issue of Pan-Africanism and the African Union, as you mentioned, I think there has been a lot of lies in history about Africa, talking about slavery, for example. We try to identify ourselves as people who are suffering because of the Western world coming in the past to take people from our continent to Europe and to America, and now becoming Black Americans, some Afro-Americans, and African Americans. So all those concepts, I think there is a need for African leaders to rewrite their history and to identify the issue of integrity in history and to fight subjectivities and to start the construction of African identity and a renaissance in our continent and the abandon of revolution. So when we try to put in place that framework and change our belief systems and redo our educational systems and start teaching the young generation to come the way we should figure out the future, the mistakes we made as Africa, and how we can draw the future with new perspectives to change our mindset, to change the way we see things, to change the worldview, and then to start giving birth to another generation who will forgive themselves, accept the truth, stand up and build Africa, and understand that African Union is not a man-made thing, it is a vision. And when we talk of it as a vision, even if those who talk about the idea, even if they died, the idea didn't die. The vision didn't die. They might die. The same thing applies like the European Union. It didn't start today. And even now, the European Union is going through challenges, but they are coming together. They are thinking of how to make it. Like taking the example of Brexit. Even now, they haven't found a solution. They are still going debate upon debate. Debate upon debate. So it means that the whole global world is faced with a lot of challenges. But we need to forgive ourselves, to say the truth, and to move on. The same thing about corruption. Corruption, it didn't start today in Africa. Corruption was there, like slavery. There was a kind of slavery in Africa before the Westerner came. The same thing happened to corruption. Corruption existed before even democracy. So it has to be, like you said, education. We have to educate people, inform them, communicate with them, put some groups, go to schools, go to churches, go to all the voodoo, all those things. Everything, talk about everybody to take responsibility to educate the African population so that there must be an awareness of what is really going on. Because there are a lot of lies. Talking about concepts we don't even understand. Even as political leaders, during debate in parliamentary section, you see people talking about things they never know. They are talking about democracy, they have never known what it means. And all the population in Africa are watching on TVs, consuming all those things, and then have a low level of thinking, a low level of viewing things. So they will deliver failure, because this is not working well. See, so that's what I have.
Yeah, thank you. the lady in red first, and then, yes?
Yeah, I'm one. Thank you. Right. So not to sound too cynical or a bit too aggressive, but despite any Pan-African ideals or like African identity, I believe that for the fact of the matter, the future of Africa is actually with China. Not to be a bit kind of like a bit of a digression, because that is where a lot of the economic development is coming from, right? So despite like cultural identity or Pan-Africanism, all that is like cute and dandy, but that is more for the social aspect. And the diaspora for a reason. They left because they want better opportunity. The opportunity is coming from the East. It is coming from Asia. It is not coming from any past European colonization. It is not coming from France to the Francophone nations. It is not coming from the UK to the previous like Anglophone nations. It is coming from China, and if that is the case, then that's kind of without much of a choice where people have to look to, because that is something that is solid. It's happening now. We know about it. There are actual loans and like Chinese feet on the ground making things happen right now for most of those sub-Saharan countries. Whether we want to argue if it's good or not, the fact is it's happening. Period. So to answer the question that was presented in a nutshell, that's where it is, regardless of anything else.
Yeah, thank you.
I was going to ask the question also, who owns the African Union? You know, if you think of just the building in Addis Ababa, built by China, every time a meeting takes place, all of the heads of state puts a Chinese flag hanging there. Is that soft power? Is that hard power? So a very important point. To put a little bit of optimism in you all, since I'm head of culture diplomacy, I'd recommend you YouTube a song tonight, also in terms of perspectives of younger generation and diaspora. It's Damian Marley, the son of Bob Marley, and the rapper Nas. They have a great song called The Promised Land, to give maybe a little bit of optimism about sort of one way Africa could look. I'm trying to basically ask similar questions in an optimistic light. So if you want a little optimism, Google it. Damian Marley and Nas, The Promised Land. But now we'll come back to the experts, please.
Yeah, I would like to add something very, very important. When you evocated slavery, I mean, Africa should look for the future. What is done is done. I can give you an example, for example. The only country in Africa was not colonized was Liberia. It was created by the support of President Monroe. You know Liberia?
Yeah.
And the capital Monrovia of President Monroe. The United States helped the Afro-Americans to create a nation called Liberia. And the United States were always defending Liberia from the rivalry between France and Britain. Let's say late 19, after the summit of Berlin. This is one example. The other example of the problem in some African countries, the debate are they should separate the religion from state. If you take into consideration, for example, Somaliland, Nigeria, North Muslim, South Christian, okay? So this country, or the African country, should do what the Europeans did before, when they separated religion from the state. This is one of the main solutions. Revenant, she was evocating the penetration of China in Africa. It's a question of interest. So China was in Africa before. She used to have commercial relations, strategic relations with Nyerere, with Angola, with Mozambique, and in all the Marxist-Leninist regimes in Africa. And today, even in Algeria, Africa is let's say, China is penetrating Africa in order to have a foothold there, and concurrency. I mean,
Competition?
yeah. against the French and the British order, the Commonwealth, the Commonwealth in general. So what I wanted to say is China helping the African countries, or is China transferring technologies to the African people?
A question?
I'm asking you a question.
Sure.
Is China transferring technologies to the African countries?
For the most part, no. China is transferring money to the African countries and
Not
probably
technologies.
development. Not
Not technologies.
No.
Because the African need technology in order to adapt the globalization.
I feel as though they would probably
So
need
it's
to
a question of profit. And that's it. It's my point of view. Okay.
I'd love to hear other perspectives also from Africans. Obviously, I'm not looking at this from the outside as well, but I've had the chance to speak to many heads of state in Africa who told me many things in private, many things publicly. First of all, in terms of official things, what happens for the most part with the China, they will come, they'll bring Chinese workers, they'll bring Chinese clothing, Chinese, etc. They don't buy hardly anything from the local economies, so in that sense, there's no benefit. Looks like the ambassador will be in 5 minutes. And then the other thing I've heard also in private from many heads of state in Africa is very often there's a new form of slavery in that the Chinese typically will bring prisoners from China to do effectively forced labor, to do the work. And so there's lots of problems in the way that this is being done. Right, okay, so you confirm it as well. Officially, nobody ever speaks about this, but effectively I would consider that a new form of modern day slavery. And it's really at the cost of the African countries in the sense they're not African locals who are doing the work, for the most part Chinese, in this case for very often prisoners. So I think that is a problem. And of course, I'm also very hesitant and I get very uneasy when I hear about like the entire government building of Lesotho all being built by Africa, or the African Union buildings as well. It's very tempting for the African countries because they basically come and they build. The Europeans come and they say, human rights and this, and put all kinds of strings on it, whereas the Chinese come and they build the road and they build it, and it's very attractive. But for me, it's always the question, what is the cost? What direction will go? Who will pull the strings of the African Union 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Any other African perspectives or non-African perspectives?
Well, an answer I hear to that very often, if that argument is there, the answer is, well, the Chinese do the same the Europeans did. And without, like you said, putting moral issues on the forefront. We don't have to be Christians to get the money or to be Democrats to have the money. The first time the Chinese came, you had to be Maoist, but even that is gone now. You just say, well, they give us money, period. They build infrastructure, period. They have their interest, like the Europeans had their interest. That's some of the answers I hear to that.
We have time for maybe 1 or 2 more comments or questions. I think the ambassador is starting to make his way in, but I want to make sure we're kind of ready once he arrives. Because you also made the point, the main focus of your speech was, of course, education. And I think education in many ways, I think most would agree, is the key. One question with education is, where do you see the biggest potential in terms of really bringing in more, let's say, outside information to Africa, or trying to embrace more local wisdom from the African communities and bringing that into the schoolroom? One of the things we observed with the French phenomenon, particularly with the colonial period, very often you had sort of a destruction of the local culture and local systems, and they really would bring the French schools and the French language, etc. And so one of the things we've observed in our research is very often local knowledge actually has many more answers than knowledge coming from the outside, but it's sometimes absent. So do you have any experience how one could try to weave together local knowledge from communities that maybe has been blocked or steamrolled away together with perhaps Western or other influences for really education at a very basic level up until higher education?
I completely agree. It needs to be bottom up. It needs to be on the local level, and there's the structures and stuff that needs to be really created. And there's lots of local knowledge that's wonderful, but I've seen no examples how to really integrate that. And that's why I talk about informal or non-formal knowledge. It's there in different settings, and how to really pick that, and how to maybe even the internet is there as an answer in putting it on the internet, or finding other sources of storing it and making it available. The language is an issue as well, because there's lots of knowledge in local languages. And you said you have to speak English. That's what she said, the lady from Uganda. Yes, you have to speak English. I'm German, I speak English as well. But language is a storage container of knowledge, and if that's gone, then you lose some of the local knowledge as well. That we try to transform and translate it into something. So it's the ambassador there.
Yes, on that note, maybe let's take the opportunity to express our sincere gratitude for an excellent presentation.